All right, grab whatever bill is closest to you. Look at it. It's just paper, cotton, and ink. Basically worthless. So here's a question that should bother you way more than it does. Why would anyone work 40 years for this? Trade an actual house for a stack of it? Fight wars over it? The answer is the wildest story in human history. A 10,000-year-old magic trick that every single person on Earth quietly agreed to believe. And tonight, we're pulling back the curtain. All of it, from seashells to servers. So let's go way back. Before banks, before coins, before money existed at all. And forget everything school taught you, because school lied. You know the barter story, right? I've got chickens, you've got wheat, we swap, and boom, that's how money started. Clean, logical, completely made up. Anthropologists spent a century hunting for a single society that actually ran on barter. They found zero, not one. It's an economics fairy tale we've been repeating for 200 years. Here's what actually happened, and honestly, it's way cooler. Early humans ran on favors. You catch a deer, you share it. The whole camp eats. Not because you're a saint, because next week the forest might snub you, and then it's your neighbor's turn to feed everyone. Nobody wrote anything down, but everybody remembered who gave, who took, who never paid it back. The first money wasn't a thing at all. It was memory. And some cultures took this to absolutely wild places. Out in the Pacific, islanders paddled canoes hundreds of miles across open ocean, risking their lives to hand someone a shell necklace. Then they turned around and paddled home. The gifts never stopped moving. They traveled in a giant circle called the Kula Ring for generations. The point was never the shell. It was the bond. You weren't rich because of what you owned. You were rich because of who owed you a favor. And up in the Pacific Northwest, chiefs flipped the whole thing upside down. They threw legendary parties called potlatches, where status came from how much you gave away. Blankets, canoes, food piled up and handed out until the host was basically broke. The most powerful man in the room was the one who ended the night with nothing. Try explaining that to a billionaire. Now, you think this sounds ancient? You did this last week. Ever fought a friend over who pays the dinner bill? Congratulations, that's a potlatch. Ever felt weirdly uncomfortable taking a gift you couldn't pay back? That's a debt of memory, 10,000 years old, still running in your head like old software. Money never replaced any of this. It just added a new layer on top, a layer for strangers. Because memory has one fatal flaw. It doesn't scale. Favors work in a village of 50. Try it in a town of 5,000 strangers, and the whole system crashes. You can't remember what a face you've never seen owes you. Humanity needed a hack, something physical, something rare, impossible to fake, and pretty enough that everyone wanted it. And the first thing that fit the bill came from the bottom of the ocean. And if you think favor economies died with the caveman, history has receipts. Fast forward to World War II, prisoner of war camps. Thousands of men, everything confiscated, no money at all. Guess what happened within weeks? They invented money from scratch. Cigarettes. Think about it. Cigarettes are perfect, standardized, visible, portable. Everyone wants them. Prices appeared out of thin air. A shirt cost so many smokes, a chocolate ration cost so many more. Non-smokers hoarded them anyway. Why would you hold something you can't use? Because everyone else would take them. Congratulations, that's the definition of currency. When Red Cross parcels arrived, cigarette supply jumped, and prices of everything else rose. That's inflation. When supplies ran short before delivery day, deflation. An entire economics textbook written by men with nothing in a cage. And one economist among the prisoners, R.A. Radford, took notes and published it all after the war. It's one of the most famous economics papers ever written. Here's what it proves. Money is not something governments give us. Money is something human groups secrete automatically, like spiders spin webs, the moment strangers need to cooperate. Take everything from people, and within a month, they'll have invented prices, loans, and probably a black market. On some Pacific islands, they even had money that expired. Red feather coils that faded year by year, losing value as the color dulled. Money with a built-in use-by date, forcing everyone to spend and keep the wealth moving. Economists in the 20th century seriously proposed the exact same idea and thought they were being original. The islands got there first, with birds. One more story from the before times, and it might be the strangest trade system ever documented. Silent trade. Herodotus described it 2,500 years ago on the West African coast. Carthaginian sailors would land, pile their goods on the beach, light a smoke signal, and walk away. Locals would come out, inspect the goods, lay gold next to the pile, and walk away. The sailors returned. Enough gold? Take it and sail off. Not enough? Touch nothing. Retreat? Wait. Rounds of silent negotiation between two peoples who shared no language, no gods, no law, and reportedly, neither side cheated. Because both sides knew, cheat once and this beach closes forever. No courts, no contracts, no common word for price, just the shadow of the future doing all the enforcement. That right there is the entire foundation of commerce. The discovery that a stranger's greed for the next deal protects you in this one. And once you see that trick, you see it everywhere. eBay ratings, Uber stars, credit scores, all of them are just the smoke signal on the beach. Reputation systems for trading with people you'll never meet. There's one more pre-money marvel, the Inca Empire. 10 million people, roads, warehouses, armies, and by most accounts, no money and no markets at all. The state ran on labor tax. You worked the empire's fields and projects part of the year, and the empire's warehouses fed and clothed everyone. Wealth was recorded on quipu, knotted strings, an accounting system we still can't fully decode. An entire civilization ran payroll on textile. So no, money isn't the only way to organize humans. It's just the way that won, and it won for one simple reason. It's the only system that works between strangers who share nothing. Except the desire to make a deal. One last before money gem. On Rossel Island near New Guinea, shell money came in 22 ranked classes. And the top-ranked shells were so sacred they could only be used for things like brides and canoes, and only handled with rituals. Low shells couldn't add up to a high shell. No amount of small change equaled the big stuff. Imagine a world where 1,000,000 $1 bills still can't buy what a single $1,000 bill buys. Sounds absurd, until you remember you can't buy a Nobel Prize, a judgeship, or a best friend with any amount of 20s. We still have ranked value classes. We just pretend we don't. The first money on Earth was not invented by a king. It wasn't designed by a genius. It washed up on a beach. Cowrie shells, small, glossy, shaped like little sleeping moons. And before you laugh at shell money, get this. Cowries were accepted currency across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific for 4,000 years. The dollar has been the world's top currency for about 80. The shell beat it by 3,900 years. Why shells? Because they nailed every requirement of money before anyone knew what money was. Hard to find in most places? Check. Instant scarcity. Impossible to counterfeit? Check. You try faking a seashell. Doesn't rot, doesn't rust. Check. You could string your entire net worth around your neck and hear it clink when you walked. But shells were just the beginning, because different cultures bet on different treasures. In the highlands, wealth walked around on 4 legs. Cattle were money that made more money, calf by calf, interest with hooves. And this is buried in your paycheck right now. The word capital comes from capita, heads, as in heads of cattle. When your bank talks about capital, it is accidentally speaking cow. It gets better. Salary comes from sol, salt. Roman soldiers were partly paid in salt, white gold you could taste. Every time you say salary, you're quoting a Roman payroll office. But the absolute champions of weird money were the people of Yap, a tiny island in the Pacific. They carved stone discs, some taller than a grown man, weighing more than a car. And here's the genius part. The stones were too heavy to move, so nobody moved them. When a stone changed owners, the island just remembered. The stone stayed in your neighbor's yard, but everyone knew it was yours now. And then it got weirder. One famous stone sank to the bottom of the sea during a storm. gone. Nobody would ever see it again. And the islanders decided it still counts. The owner stayed rich. His money was at the bottom of the ocean, and it still worked because everyone agreed it existed. Now, before you call that crazy, check your bank account. Go ahead. Numbers on a screen. You have never seen that money. You will never touch most of it. It exists in a database you've never visited, and you're fine with that. The people of Yap didn't have a primitive system. They had our system, 500 years early. They just used better rocks. Money is memory. Money is agreement. Everything else, the shells, the stones, the paper, the apps, is just decoration. And once humans figured that out, the next step was obvious. If money is really just a record, why not write it down? Oh, and shells have one more twist for you, because shell money didn't quietly retire into museums. When European traders reached West Africa, they didn't laugh at cowrie money, they industrialized it. Ships hauled literal tons of cowries from the Maldives to West African ports, buying goods and, horrifically, people with shells scooped from another ocean. And here's the economics lesson buried in that dark chapter. It worked exactly like printing money. Europeans found the mint, the one place in the ocean where cowries were abundant, and flooded the market. Result? Cowrie inflation. It took centuries, but the shells slowly bought less and less until sacks of them were worth almost nothing. The oldest currency on Earth died of the same disease that kills paper money. Someone found a way to make too much of it. Meanwhile, the Yap Islanders got their own brutal lesson in money printing. An Irish-American sailor named David O'Keefe, shipwrecked there in the 1870s, saw the stone money and had a very modern idea. He fetched modern iron tools, sailed to the Quarry Islands, and started mass-producing stone discs. Cheap, fast, easy. And you know what the Yap Peace elders did? They discounted his stones. O'Keefe's stones were worth less precisely because they were easy to make. No economics degree, no central bank, and they'd instantly invented the concept of hard money versus easy money. The old stones, cut by hand and hauled across open ocean at the cost of real lives, stayed precious. Difficulty was the whole point. Some economists argue this is the deepest law of money in existence. Anything easy to create eventually becomes worthless. Keep that sentence in your pocket. This entire story is going to keep proving it, century after century, all the way to your banking app. There's one more shell story, and honestly, it might be the darkest and most important one: wampum. When Dutch and English colonists arrived in North America, the coastal nations used belts of white and purple shell beads, wampum, for treaties, gifts, memory, and honor. Woven patterns that recorded agreements. A belt was a contract you could hold. The colonists, chronically short of European coins, adopted wampum as actual legal currency. For decades, you could pay taxes in Massachusetts with shell beads. And then the colonists did the inevitable colonist thing: they industrialized it. Dutch workshops started drilling beads with steel tools, flooding the market with cheap wampum. Sound familiar? Same story as the cowrie, same story as O'Keefe's fake stones. Easy money crowding out hard money. Inflation eating a sacred system alive. Within a couple of generations, wampum collapsed as currency, helped along by colonists who'd learned to counterfeit even the purple beads with dye. 1,000 years of woven memory, destroyed by a drill press. And while we're collecting weird money, take tea bricks, compressed blocks of tea leaves that circulated as cash across Central Asia and Siberia into the 20th century. Money you could literally boil and drink in an emergency. Try that with a 20. Or the Katanga crosses of the Congo, copper cast into big X shapes, each one worth roughly a goat. Or iron manillas, the bracelet money of West Africa. Every one of these worked for centuries. Every one of them died the same way. Someone, somewhere, figured out how to make too many. Write the rule down, because the rest of this video is just this rule wearing different costumes. Money only works while it's hard to make. The moment it gets easy, it's already dying. Oh, and one civilization solved money deliciously. The Aztecs used cacao beans, actual chocolate, as cash. A rabbit cost about 10 beans. Prices survive in colonial records. Money literally grew on trees and could be drunk as hot chocolate, which means Aztec money had a built-in dividend. And of course, humans being humans, archaeologists confirmed the inevitable. Counterfeit cacao beans, hollowed out shells packed with mud, passed off as the real thing. People faked chocolate money 500 years ago. If there is one constant in this story, it's that the counterfeiter arrives about 15 minutes after the currency does. 5,000 years ago, between two rivers in what's now Iraq, humans built the first real cities. Uruk, Babylon. Tens of thousands of strangers packed together, and one giant problem. How do you keep track of who owes what when you can't possibly know everyone? The answer? Changed the world, and it was literally mud. Soft river clay, pressed flat, poked with a reed pen, dried in the sun. And here's the plot twist nobody tells you. Writing, the most important invention in human history, was not invented for poetry, not for prayers, not for love letters. The first writing on planet Earth was accounting. So many jars of barley, so many baskets of dates, owed by this guy to that temple by next harvest. We imagine ancient scribes recording epic legends. For the first 500 years, receipts. Humanity learned to write because somebody needed an invoice. And those clay receipts quietly became something bigger. The temples turned into the world's first banks. Farmers deposited grain, priests recorded it on clay, and those tablets started changing hands. If a tablet said the temple owes the bearer 10 measures of barley, that tablet was 10 measures of barley. People traded the promise instead of hauling the grain. Money before metal wasn't gold. It was paperwork. Trust, baked in clay. Silver showed up next, but not as coins. Coins didn't exist yet. A shekel wasn't a coin, it was a weight, about 8 grams of silver, measured on little scales at the market. Merchants carried silver coils and just snipped bits off. Imagine paying for lunch with wire cutters. And Babylon didn't stop there. The Code of Hammurabi, carved in stone 4,000 years ago, set official interest rates, loan regulations, debt rules, and something we've almost forgotten, scheduled debt forgiveness. In hard years, the king would declare a clean slate, and the tablets got ceremonially smashed. Imagine that sound, 1,000 years of debt shattering into dust in the town square. They understood something we're still learning. Squeeze a society too hard and it snaps. My favorite part of all of it, among those thousands of tablets, archaeologists found one from a customer named Nani, furious about a copper shipment. Bad quality, rude service. He carved his complaint into clay and had it delivered to a merchant named Ea Nasser. That's right, the oldest customer complaint in human history is 3,800 years old, and Ea Nasser kept it. His house had a whole room of angry letters. 4,000 years later, we found his 1-star reviews. Trade ran on reputation then, it runs on reputation now. The clay dried, the reviews never stopped. And Babylon has one more gift for you, the world's first financial scandals. Because those clay tablets recorded everything. And everything includes crime. Archaeologists found records of a family firm, the Murashu House, that ran loan sharking operations sophisticated enough to make a hedge fund blush. High-interest loans against farmland, foreclosures, the works. 400 years before anyone coined the word banker, the ancient world already had predatory lending. And they had homework. We've dug up the actual school exercises of Babylonian accounting students, math problems about loans and interest, scratched into clay by bored teenagers 4,000 years ago. Some tablets still have mistakes on them, with corrections. A kid's math homework preserved longer than the Roman Empire. The temples even ran a 2-tier money system that's weirdly modern. Silver by weight for big deals and long-distance trade, think of it as their wire transfer, and barley by the jar for wages and daily bread, the small bills. 2 currencies, 1 economy, everyone switching between them without thinking. And the interest rates were written in law. 33% for barley loans, 20% for silver. Which sounds insane until you realize a bad harvest could kill you and the lender was pricing in the apocalypse. That's why the clean slate decrees existed. When debt piled up too high, when too many farmers were one drought away from selling their children, the king would smash the ledger and reset the board. Not out of kindness, out of engineering. A society, they understood, is like a lute string. Tighten it forever and it snaps. 5,000 years later, we're still arguing about the same thing. We just call it debt relief and pretend it's a new idea. And Mesopotamia hides one more first: the world's first business contracts and the world's first signatures. Every merchant carried a cylinder seal, a little carved stone tube unique as a fingerprint, rolled across wet clay to sign a deal. Lose your seal and you'd better report it fast. Ancient identity theft was very real, and there are tablets recording exactly that panic. My seal is lost, honor nothing rolled with it. 4,000 years before you called the bank to freeze a stolen card, some Babylonian merchant was doing the exact same thing in clay. The temples even ran what historians call proto-insurance, caravan loans where the debt was canceled if bandits robbed you en route. The lender ate the loss and charged everyone extra interest to cover it. That's risk pooling, the entire insurance industry compressed into one Bronze Age clause. And the very first cities may have run on beveled rim bowls. Uruk's ruins are littered with millions of these crude, identical, mass-produced clay bowls. Most archaeologists think they were ration containers, one bowl of barley, one day's pay, which would make the humble lunch bowl the world's first paycheck. Workers building humanity's first monuments, paid in standardized units of grain, recorded by scribes, stored in temples. Sound like a payroll department? It was one. Here's what should give you chills. We like to imagine money was invented for trade, for adventure, for merchants on the high seas. The clay says otherwise. Money was invented for wages, taxes, and debts, the state keeping score on its people. The romance came later. The spreadsheet came first. It was always a spreadsheet. And one linguistic fossil before we leave Babylon, their word for interest, mosh, literally meant calf, baby animal, because the first loans were livestock, and a borrowed herd paid its own interest by giving birth. Greek did the same thing. Tokos, interest, also means offspring, money that breeds. Aristotle later called charging interest unnatural for exactly this reason. Metal, he said, can't have babies. 23 centuries later, your savings account still yields, and your investments still grow. We never stop talking about money like it's alive. Deep down, we never stop believing it either. Around 600 BC, in a small kingdom called Lydia, Western Turkey today, somebody had an idea so simple and so powerful that it conquered the planet faster than any army ever has. Lydia's rivers washed down electrum, a natural mix of gold and silver glittering in the mud. People traded the lumps, but every single deal meant weighing, testing, arguing. So some unknown genius, we will never know their name, did this. Melt the lump, stamp it with the king's lion, guarantee the weight. Done. That's it. That's the coin. And that little stamped lump is one of the most successful inventions of all time. Because the stamp did something magical. It replaced trust. Before coins, every trade between strangers started with suspicion. Weigh it, bite it, question the guy. After coins, I know that lion. The lion spends. Any market, any language, any god. The trade just works. Trust outsourced to a piece of metal. Lydia's last king was Croesus, and yes, he's that Croesus. 26 centuries later, we still say rich as Croesus. He minted the first pure gold and pure silver coins, and his wealth became so legendary it outlived his entire civilization. It did not, however, save him. Croesus asked the famous oracle at Delphi whether he should attack Persia. The oracle answered, if you go to war, a great empire will fall. Croesus loved that, marched right out. A great empire did fall. It was his. The coins survived him. They always survive. And the Greeks took the idea and ran. Athens struck its silver owls, arguably the first international currency, accepted from Egypt to India because everyone trusted Athenian silver. Every island, every city minted its own designs. Dolphins, horses, gods. Coins became tiny billboards, the first mass media. A king could put his face in the pocket of every citizen. And something sneakier happened. With coins came prices. Suddenly, everything, a day's work, a jar of oil, a boat ride, a sacrifice to the gods, could be measured in the same units. Some historians point out that philosophy was born in exactly these coin-soaked market towns, and they don't think it's a coincidence. Once you learn to ask what everything is worth, you start asking what anything really is. One little stamped lump of metal, and humanity got universal trust, mass media, prices, and an existential crisis. Not bad for a pebble with a lion on it. Want to know how fast the coin idea spread? It's genuinely scary. Lydia strikes the first coins around 600 BC. Within a single century, 1 century, in a world where news traveled at the speed of a donkey, there are mints across the entire Greek world, from Sicily to the Black Sea. No invention had ever moved that fast, and each city's coin became its brand. Aegina stamped sea turtles, Corinth flew winged Pegasus, Athens went with the owl of Athena, and those silver owls became so trusted that they turn up in buried hordes from Spain to Afghanistan. Archaeologists literally map ancient trade routes by following the owls out of the ground, like silver breadcrumbs. Persia's great king saw it and went luxury. The derrick, nearly pure gold, stamped with the king himself as an archer. For 2 centuries, if you wanted to bribe a Greek politician, and the Persians bribed many, you did it with archers. The joke at the time, Greek city walls fall not to Persian arrows, but to Persian archers, the gold ones. And of course, the moment coins existed, someone started cheating. Counterfeiters shaved slivers off coin edges. Cities caught on and started testing money. There was literally a public slave in Athens whose job was cutting into suspect coins at the market. Fake-checking money is as old as money. Even the ridged edge on a modern coin? Go grab one. Feel the little ribs? That's Isaac Newton's anti-shaving invention from 3 centuries ago. Still riding on your pocket change. A pebble with a lion on it created trust, prices, mass media, crime, fraud detection, and international bribery, all within 100 years. Humans work fast when money's involved. Coins didn't just spread, they got weaponized, and nobody weaponized them like Alexander the Great. When he tore through the Persian Empire, he cracked open its royal vaults, centuries of hoarded gold and silver, mountains of it sitting frozen in Persepolis and Susa. Alexander did something the ancient world had never seen. He minted it all. Millions of coins stamped with Heracles flooding out with his armies. Money that had slept in vaults for 200 years suddenly hit the streets of 3 continents at once. Prices jumped across the Eastern Mediterranean, a money-printing stimulus 3 centuries before Christ, with the exact consequences a modern economist would predict. His generals carved up the empire, and every one of them kept minting, now with their own faces. And that was new. Before Alexander, coins carried gods and symbols. After him, living rulers. The coin became a propaganda machine, the only mass-produced image of power most people would ever hold. Rome took notes. When Julius Caesar put his own living face on the denarius, traditional Romans were scandalized. That was a king thing, a god thing. Weeks later, he was dead on the Senate floor, and the message got even sharper. His assassin, Brutus, minted a coin celebrating the murder. 2 daggers and the words Ed Mar, the Ides of March. An assassination announcement? On pocket change? That one coin, a political tweet in silver, sold at auction recently for millions of dollars. And the temples got in on money too. Delphi and Delos functioned as sacred banks. States and kings deposited fortunes under the god's protection. Because who robs a god? Sanctuaries doing safe deposit, priests keeping ledgers. Religion and finance were roommates from the very beginning. They never really moved apart. One more Croesus story, because it's too good. Before trusting the oracle at Delphi with his war question, Croesus ran the world's first recorded vendor audit. He sent messengers to 7 different oracles, each instructed to ask on the same day, what is King Croesus doing right now? Then he did the most unkingly thing imaginable. Boiled a tortoise and a lamb together in a bronze pot, betting no oracle could guess it. Delphi nailed it, in verse. So Croesus gave Delphi the contract, mountains of gold, and then got the famously ambiguous answer that destroyed him. He tested the oracle scientifically, got proof it was legit, and still misread the fine print. Due diligence can verify the source. It cannot save you from hearing what you want to hear. Rome didn't invent the coin. Rome did something scarier. Rome showed the world what coins could build, and then gave a masterclass in how to destroy them. Start with the name. Roman coins were struck in the temple of Juno Moneta. Moneta? Money? Mint? Monetary? Every time you say money, you are literally naming a Roman goddess. Her temple hammered out the denarius, the silver coin that paid for everything. Roads, aqueducts, lighthouses, and the legions, from foggy Britain to the Egyptian desert. A Roman soldier signed up for 25 years, and his silver spent anywhere. Wine in Gaul, bread in Syria, fish sauce in Spain. One currency wrapped around the entire Mediterranean, and Rome's money system was scarily modern. Bankers, the Argentari, worked tables in the Forum. Rich Romans barely touched coins. They moved fortunes with written notes and wax seals. There were ship loans, credit auctions, and in the year 33 AD, get this, Rome had a full-blown financial panic, and Emperor Tiberius fixed it by pumping interest-free loans into the banking system. A government bailout 2,000 years before 2008. But empires are expensive, and the mines started running dry. So emperor after emperor discovered the same dirty trick. Melt the coins down, add a little more copper, a little less silver, and stamp out more coins than you started with. Free money! Each coin looked identical. Each coin was a little more of a lie. Under Marcus Aurelius, the denarius was 75% silver. A century later, 5%. A mood ring with an emperor's face on it. Merchants weren't stupid. Prices exploded. Emperor Diocletian responded like a true politician. He made inflation illegal. The edict on maximum prices. Death penalty for overcharging. The result? Merchants just stopped selling. Markets emptied overnight. Turns out you can execute merchants, but you cannot execute arithmetic. Rome's money didn't die in a day, and neither did Rome. It faded, coin by clipped coin, promise by broken promise. Soldiers started demanding payment in land and food instead of the lying silver, and some historians say you can see the medieval world being born right there. Knights and manors condensing out of Rome's failing paychecks. And the coins? Farmers still plow them out of European soil today. Roman coins have been found buried in southern India, payment for pepper and silk that sailed the monsoon winds. Little silver faces of forgotten emperors, 20 centuries later, still waiting to be spent. Money doesn't just record history, sometimes it steers it, and Rome's money machine had corners even most history buffs never hear about. Take Egypt, Rome's breadbasket. It ran on grain banks, state warehouses where your wheat deposit became a balance you could transfer to someone else's account on paper without a single sack moving. Account-to-account payments 2,000 years before your banking app did it. The papyrus receipts survive. Or take the army payday pipeline. Every legion had its own savings bank. Soldiers were half forced to deposit part of their pay with the unit's standard bearer, who doubled as the branch manager. The idea was brilliant and cynical. A soldier with savings in the camp strongbox thinks twice before deserting. Loyalty, engineered through banking. And when the silver debasement finally poisoned everything, watch what people did, because it's a masterclass in how money actually dies. Nobody announced the denarius was garbage. Instead, good old coins quietly vanished. People hoarded the high silver ones and spent the junk ones as fast as possible, which is why farmers keep digging up buried pots of the good coins. That instinct even has a name, Gresham's Law. Bad money drives out good. Named after a Tudor banker, but Roman housewives were living it 14 centuries before he was born. Egypt kept the receipts on this too. Papyrus records show prices of wheat over the 3rd century rising tenfold, then 100-fold as the coins hollowed out. One merchant's letter survives, telling his partner to spend the imperial coins immediately before they lose more value. That That letter could be texted out of any hyperinflation in modern history, word for word. Money dies the same way every time, not with an announcement, but with everyone quietly running for the exit at once. And no tour of Roman money is complete without meeting the worst rich man in history, Marcus Licinius Crassus, the man who monetized fire. Rome had no public fire department, so Crassus built a private one. 500 trained slaves, fast as any modern crew. When a building caught fire, they'd sprint to the scene and stand there, doing nothing. While the flames spread, Crassus would find the desperate owner and offer to buy the burning building, at a fire sale price, obviously. The moment the owner said yes, the crew leapt into action and saved Crassus's new property. Repeat that a few thousand times, and Crassus ended up owning a huge slice of the city of Rome, with a fortune ancient sources put at the level of the entire Roman treasury. Proof 2,000 years early that the most profitable business is a crisis you control. He eventually died chasing even more wealth in a disastrous war in the East, and legend says his enemies poured molten gold down his throat as commentary. The Romans loved that story. It was probably too poetic to be true. They told it anyway, and Rome kept accidentally inventing the future. Emperors handed out cash bonuses to citizens, congiaria to buy popularity, stimulus checks with a toga. The state subsidized grain for the masses, food stamps, first century edition. Government contractors, the publicani, bid on tax collection contracts and squeezed provinces so brutally that publican became an insult you can still find in the Bible. Every headline you'll read this year about subsidies, contractors, bailouts, and billionaires profiting from disasters, Rome ran the pilot episode 20 centuries ago. History doesn't rhyme. With money, it photocopies. One more Roman coin trick. Archaeologists keep finding denarii with tiny test cuts, banker's marks, sliced into them by suspicious money changers checking for plated fakes. Some coins have dozens of cuts, a lifetime of distrust recorded in scars. And the fakes they were hunting? Foray coins, bronze cores wrapped in silver foil, some so good they fooled markets for decades. A few were probably struck by corrupt mint workers using official dies. Inside jobs 2,000 years before anyone said inside job. Every coin that passed through ancient hands carried the same silent question ours do. Is this real? The answer, then and now, was always the same. It's real if the next person takes it. While Europe was stumbling through its early Middle Ages, China was casually inventing the future. By the Tang Dynasty, Chinese merchants were rich in copper coins, round with a square hole, strung together in bundles of 1,000, which created history's funniest problem. Chinese money was too heavy. A wealthy trader needed a cart just to go shopping. Serious purchases were measured in tons. Somebody had to fix this, and the merchants of Sichuan did. Leave your coin mountain with a trusted house, take home a paper receipt. Then the light bulb. Why bother collecting the coins at all? Just trade the receipts. The government watched this for a while, then did what governments do, took over. The Song Dynasty printed the Yaozi, the first official paper money in human history. Woodblock printed, black and red inks, intricate designs to beat counterfeiters 900 years before Europe caught up. And stop and feel how insane this was. For all of human history, money was a thing. A shell you could hold, a cow you could feed, silver you could bite. Now, money was a picture of a promise, a piece of paper whispering, "Trust me." When Marco Polo finally reached China and saw the Great Khan's mints turning mulberry bark into money, he wrote it down almost apologetically because he knew nobody in Venice would believe him. The emperor, he basically wrote, makes money out of trees. They called him a liar for years. And under Kublai Khan, paper wasn't optional. Refuse the emperor's paper money? That could cost you your head. Foreign merchants had to swap their gold and silver for paper at the border. One of the most powerful men in history looked at gold and said, "My paper is better." And here's the thing, as long as the empire held, it was. But paper has a dark side, and China found it first, repeatedly. Printing paper is easy, too easy. Every time a war got expensive, the printing blocks worked overtime, and the paper's magic quietly drained away. China invented paper money and then uninvented it several times through overprinting and slowly drifted back to silver. The lesson was carved early and it never changed. Paper money is a miracle exactly as trustworthy as the hand that prints it. There's a Ming Dynasty banknote sitting in a museum right now, 600 years old, ink still crisp. It promises the bearer one string of cash. The dynasty is dust. The paper outlived the empire that printed it. Paper is patient. And China wasn't done inventing. Before the jiaozi even existed, Tang Dynasty merchants used something with the greatest name in financial history: flying cash. Paper certificates for long-distance payments? Deposit copper in the capital, fly the paper across the empire, cash out at the other end. Not because the paper flew, but because it made money fly across distances no cart could survive. Tea merchants swore by it, and once the Song state took over printing, they industrialized it beyond anything Europe could imagine. Government print works employing thousands of workers, multicolor printing with secret inks, serial numbers, expiration dates, anti-counterfeiting seals, and the death penalty for forgers, printed right on the note as a friendly reminder. Some surviving notes literally say counterfeiters will be decapitated, informants get the counterfeiter's property as a reward. Incentives! They thought of everything, except the one thing nobody can print: restraint. The Southern Song fought endless wars, printed endless Huizi notes, and watched them rot in value. The yuan, under Kublai, went full paper, banned gold and silver from circulation entirely at one point. And when his dynasty overprinted during floods and rebellions, the empire's money died before the empire did. By the time the Ming gave up on paper in the 1400s, China, the inventor of paper money, had switched back to weighing silver ingots like it was Babylon again. Full circle, 1,500 years of innovation, right back to the scale. And in one of history's greatest ironies, the silver China now demanded for everything, it was about to come flooding in from a mountain in Peru, connecting our story's next chapter directly to this one. Everything connects. That's the thing about money. It's one single story wearing different hats. China has one more money story, and it's the wildest what-if in this entire video. The emperor who tried everything 2,000 years early. Wang Mang, a palace official who seized the throne around year 9 AD, looked at money and decided to reinvent all of it, by decree, overnight. He rolled out 28 different denominations at once: gold, silver, tortoiseshell money, cowries, an entire zoo of currencies with government-fixed exchange rates that ignored what the metal was actually worth. He banned private gold ownership and forced people to swap gold for bronze at rates that were basically confiscation. 19 centuries before America did something eerily similar in 1933, which, hold that thought, we'll get there. The result was total, immediate chaos. Nobody could price anything. Counterfeiting exploded because half the official coins were worth less than the metal in them. Merchants abandoned the official money entirely and quietly went back to trading in grain and cloth, the market firing the government's money like a bad employee. Wang Mang responded like every panicking currency reformer since: harsher penalties, new redesigns, more decrees. 14 years in, a starving mob stormed the palace, and it ended the way these stories end. And the deep lesson survived him, carved into Chinese financial memory. You can decree a currency into existence, but you cannot decree that people trust it. Centuries later, when the Song were designing their paper jiaozi, they did everything Wang Mang didn't. Backed reserves, controlled issues, redemption guarantees. For a while. Money is the one law that citizens get to veto, silently, one refused transaction at a time. Every government in this story learns that eventually. None of them learn it in advance. And a quick bow to the quiet victim of China's paper age: copper. When paper collapsed and everyone fled back to metal, China hit chronic coin famines. There literally wasn't enough copper to run the economy.
So Chinese coins leaked across Asia. Japan, at one point, basically ran its monetary system on imported Chinese coins for centuries, rather than minting seriously itself. Vietnamese, Javanese, Japanese markets all price things in strings of Chinese cash. One country's small change became half a continent's money supply. The medieval version of countries using the US dollar today. Currencies have always ignored borders. Borders just take a while to notice. Medieval Europe was a currency nightmare. Every duke, every bishop, every ambitious count minted his own thin silver pennies. Cross a river? New coins. Cross another? New coins again. Traveling merchants lived at the money changers' table. And that table is hiding in your vocabulary right now. The Italian word for bench is banca. The money changers worked on benches. Banca, bank. And when a money changer went broke, his bench was ceremonially smashed. Banca rota, broken bench. Bankruptcy. Every bankruptcy filing on earth is quoting medieval furniture damage. Meanwhile, England ran its royal accounting on sticks. Willow sticks, notched to record amounts split down the middle. One half for the payer, one for the crown. The wood grain matched perfectly, so forgery was impossible. Genius, honestly. Tally sticks ran England's finances for 700 years. And the ending is too perfect. In 1834, Parliament finally decided to burn the obsolete sticks. The furnaces overheated. The fire escaped, and the Houses of Parliament burned to the ground. England's old money took the government building with it on the way out. Money holds grudges. Then there were the Templars, warrior monks sworn to poverty who accidentally invented international banking. Here's their trick. A pilgrim heading to Jerusalem deposits gold in London, gets a coded letter, walks 2,000 miles through bandit country, carrying nothing. Shows the letter in Jerusalem,
withdraws his money.
The gold never moved, only the information did.
Sound familiar?
That's a wire transfer in chainmail. The Templars got so rich that the King of France, deep in debt to them, solved his loan the medieval way. Mass arrests, show trials, and fires. Pro tip from history, never become richer than the king. The gentler revolution came from Florence. The Medici family built a banking web from London to Rome, and their real superpower wasn't gold, it was bookkeeping. Double entry. Every transaction written twice, debit and credit, so the books always balance. A monk named Pacioli wrote the manual. Leonardo da Vinci did the illustrations for his math book. Boring? That boring grid built the Renaissance. Michelangelo's David, Botticelli's Venus, funded by men who wrote everything down twice. The florins stayed pure gold for 3 centuries. All of Europe trusted it, and the lesson landed. Trust can be manufactured out of ink, method, and verification. That discovery was worth more than every galleon of treasure that was about to sail. Speaking of which, let me add the missing piece of medieval money, the one that actually powered everything: the fairs. 6 times a year, in the Champagne region of France, merchants from all over Europe converged. Italians with silk and spices, Flemish with cloth, Germans with furs. And these fairs had a problem, hauling literal chests of coins across bandit country, twice a year in both directions. The solution changed the world: the bill of exchange. An Italian merchant in Champagne could buy Flemish cloth with a piece of paper promising payment in florins at the next fair. The debt traveled, the gold stayed home. And here's the beautiful trick hidden inside. The church had banned charging interest. Usury was a sin that could get you excommunicated. But a bill of exchange involved 2 currencies and a time delay, so the interest could hide inside the exchange rate, completely invisible. completely deliberate. Bankers spent 3 centuries doing interest-bearing loans while technically never charging interest and confessing absolutely nothing. Half of early banking genius was just creative sin management. By the 1400s, the Medici network settled most fair debts by paper alone. Clearinghouses where 100 merchants' debts canceled each other out and barely a coin moved. And a century later, the Fugger family of Augsburg took it further than anyone. Jakob Fugger, arguably the richest private person in history, worth a chunk of Europe's entire GDP, bankrolled emperors, bought a papal election, and held copper and silver monopolies across half a continent. When kings needed wars funded, they called Jacob. When Jacob wanted mining rights, kings listened. The gold-owning kings thought they had the power. The men with the ledgers knew better. Sound familiar? It should. It never stopped being true. Medieval money has one more gift for your vocabulary, and it's hiding in the word bourse, the European word for stock exchange. It comes from Bruges, where traders gathered at an inn owned by the Van der Beurs family. Meeting at the bourse became the phrase for going to trade, and when the action moved to Antwerp and Amsterdam, the name traveled with it. The world's stock exchanges, Paris Bourse, Frankfurt Börse, are all named after a medieval family's pub. And Venice deserves a chapter of its own. While Florence had the florin, Venice ran the ducat. Same weight, same purity for 500 years straight. Half a millennium without debasement. No empire in this story showed that kind of discipline, and it made the ducat the dollar of the Mediterranean. Venice also pioneered something spicier, the forced loan. The Republic didn't just tax rich citizens, it made them lend to the state, registered the debts in a public ledger, paid interest, and let citizens sell their loan claims to each other. Congratulations! That's a government bond market in the 12th century. The Rialto wasn't just a bridge, it was Wall Street with gondolas. Genoa went even further. Its bankers created the Casa di San Giorgio, a private mega institution that took over managing the state's debts and colonies. A corporation so powerful, Machiavelli basically described it as a state within the state. Sound like too big to fail? They invented that feeling 500 years before the phrase. By 1600, every ingredient of modern finance existed somewhere in Italy. Banks, bonds, exchanges, holding companies, and institutions governments couldn't afford to let die. The modern world didn't invent finance. It inherited it from people who took an 800-year head start. One more medieval loophole for the road. The church banned interest, so bankers invented dry exchange, a loan disguised as 2 currency trades that canceled out with the exchange rates set so the lender profited exactly like interest. Paperwork theater, pure and simple. Theologians wrote entire treatises debating which financial gymnastics counted as sin. Bankers funded cathedrals, partly as fire insurance for the soul. The Medici built chapels. Jakob Fugger built an entire subsidized housing complex for the poor, the Fuggerei, which still operates today. Rent? Less than €1 a year, plus 3 daily prayers for the founder's soul. 500 years on, tenants are still paying Jakob's interest in prayers. Now that is a long-term bond. In 1545, high in the freezing Andes, the Spanish found a mountain. Not a mountain with silver in it, a mountain that basically was silver. Cerro Rico, the rich hill above a town called Potosí. Over the next 2 centuries, that single mountain produced more silver than the rest of the world combined. Tens of thousands died mining it, and the silver that came out of that rock proceeded to break the entire planet's economy in the most educational way possible. Spanish galleons hauled it across the Atlantic, and Spanish pieces of 8 became the first truly global money, jingling in pockets from Amsterdam to Manila to Beijing. Every pirate movie you've ever seen, pieces of 8, that's this coin. In 1571, Spain founded Manila and the circle closed. Silver from the Andes crossed the Pacific, traded for Chinese silk and porcelain, which sailed back toward Europe, whose bankers financed more ships, which needed more silver. For the first time in history, every inhabited continent was wired into one trading loop. A coin minted in Potosí could end its life in a merchant's chest in Canton, and thousands did.
China was the ocean all that silver poured into. Chinese merchants trusted the Spanish dollar so much, they stamped tiny inspection marks into each coin as it passed, little tattoos of approval. So Spain, sitting on the money mountain, became the richest kingdom on earth. And then, mysteriously, one of the poorest. Because Spain had found treasure, but missed the lesson inside it. Money is not wealth. Money is a claim on wealth, on grain, cloth, ships, work. Double the silver without doubling the actual stuff, and every coin just buys half as much. Prices across Europe crept up for 100 straight years. So slowly nobody alive could see it, so surely historians call it the price revolution. Nobody understood what was happening. The money itself had changed, and no one had a word for it yet.
The Spanish crown, drowning in silver, went bankrupt not once, not twice, but at least 4 times. They'd spent tomorrow's treasure fleets on yesterday's wars. And the silver, it flowed straight through Spanish fingers to the Dutch shipwrights and English weavers who actually made things. The treasure ended up with the workshops, not the conquerors. You can mine money out of a mountain, you cannot mine value. Value is made patiently by hands. The hollowed-out mountain still stands over Potosí tonight, keeping what's left of its silver in the dark, like a monument to the most expensive lesson in economics. One more silver story, because it's too good to skip. The piece of 8 didn't just circulate, it became America's money.
For decades after independence, the United States ran heavily on Spanish silver dollars. Because they were everywhere and everyone trusted them, the US dollar itself was modeled directly on the Spanish dollar. And here's the fossil hiding in modern finance. Pieces of 8 were literally cut into 8 wedges to make change. 2 wedges were a quarter. That's why Americans call 25 cents 2 bits to this day. New York Stock Exchange prices were quoted in eighths of a dollar, 1/8 ticks, until 2001. 2001. Wall Street spent the entire 20th century, the computer age, the moon landing, still counting money in pieces of a chopped up Spanish coin. And Spain's silver had one more trick. It crashed Japan into the story. Japanese mines were pouring out silver at the same time, and canny traders discovered gold and silver traded at different ratios in different countries. Silver bought more gold in Asia than in Europe, so ships just shuttled metal in circles, buying gold cheap here, selling silver dear there. Planetary scale arbitrage centuries before anyone had a word for it. Meanwhile, the Spanish crown kept demonstrating the lesson of the age. It defaulted on its debts in 1557, 1560, 1575, 1596. Bankruptcy as a recurring calendar event while sitting on the richest mountain on Earth. Genoa's bankers, who kept lending anyway at ever juicier rates, made fortunes off Spain's addiction. The mountain paid, the crown spent, the bankers won. If you want one sentence for this whole chapter, it's this. Gold and silver flow to whoever does the math, not whoever holds the sword. And the silver century has a body count that needs saying out loud. The mountain of Potosí ran on the Mita, a colonial forced labor draft that pulled tens of thousands of Andean men into the tunnels. The mercury used to refine the silver poisoned miners at the refineries of Huancavelica so reliably that being sent there was understood as a slow death sentence. Estimates of deaths across the colonial mining system run into the hundreds of thousands. The pieces of 8 jingling through this whole chapter were minted with that. Money's story isn't just clever, sometimes it's paid in lives, and pretending otherwise makes the history worthless. The silver also sailed with consequences. The Manila galleons went down in storms often enough that the Pacific floor is still dotted with billion-dollar wrecks. Treasure hunters and governments fight in court today over ships that sank 4 centuries ago. In 2007, a salvage company pulled 17 tons of silver coins off one Spanish wreck. Spain sued and won it all back. Colonial money still generating lawsuits in the 21st century? And one more delicious irony to close the chapter. All that silver pouring into Spain didn't even stay in Spain long enough to get warm. Contemporary Spaniards had a saying. Silver was
born in the Americas, died in Spain, and was buried in China. The empire was a pipe, not a bucket. Spain held the sword, Genoa held the ledgers, China held the ledgers, China held the demand, and the Dutch and English quietly built the workshops and the ships. Within a century, those workshop nations would rule the world's money, and the Empire of Silver would be borrowing from everyone.
The metal was never the power. The system was. Always has been. And a treasure chest footnote, those romantic pirate doubloons and pieces of 8 were mostly ugly little things. Cobs, irregular lumps, sheared off silver bars, hand-struck, every one a different shape. Beautiful coins were for Europe. The colonies got the fast food version. Pirates loved them anyway, because silver is silver. And the Spanish dollar's global fan club had one more member you'd never guess. It stayed legal tender in the United States until 1857. American shopkeepers made change in Spanish silver for 80 years after independence. The first money most Americans ever touched had a Spanish king on it. Empires end, their pocket change lingers. Amsterdam, the 1630s, the richest city on the planet. The Dutch had just invented most of modern finance. The first big stock exchange, the first mega corporation, futures contracts, insurance, serious, sober Protestant bankers. And then this entire nation of accountants lost its collective mind over flowers. Tulips had arrived from the Ottoman Empire, and some bulbs carried a virus that painted the petals in feathered flames of white and crimson. Nobody could predict which bulb would break into beauty. Every bulb was a lottery ticket, sleeping in the dirt. Prices started climbing, then galloping. Traders met in taverns, buying and selling bulbs that were still underground. Paper claims on future flowers flipped 5 times in one evening by people who never intended to plant anything. At the peak, in the winter of 1637, a single Semper Augustus bulb was priced like a canal house in Amsterdam. A flower, priced like a house. And then, one February morning in Harlem, at a completely ordinary auction, nobody raised their hand. That's it. That's the whole crash. No war, no plague, no announcement, just one room, one silence, and everyone suddenly remembering, at the same moment, that a tulip is a tulip. Prices didn't fall, they evaporated. Now, historians will tell you the real damage was smaller than the legend, and they're right, but the shape of it became a template the world would trace again and again and again. London, 1720, the South Sea Company, a majestic trading business that barely did any trading. Shares up 8-fold on pure vibes, then straight down into parliamentary rage. And it took down a very famous victim, Isaac Newton. The man who decoded gravity, bought in, sold early with a nice profit, watched his friends keep getting richer, bought back in at the top, and lost a fortune. His conclusion is immortal. I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. The smartest man alive wrecked by FOMO. And France went even bigger. A Scottish gambler named John Law, convicted duelist, escaped prisoner, mathematical genius, talked his way into running the finances of the entire French kingdom. He printed paper money, tied it to a company that owned basically swampland in Mississippi, and Paris went insane. Share prices rose 50-fold. The word millionaire was literally coined in French to describe the winners. A hunchbacked man made a living renting his back as a writing desk for share contracts. 1 year later, the whole shimmering thing folded like a paper lantern in the rain. Law died broke in Venice. But look around. Paper money, national banks, credit-driven trade. We live inside John Law's idea. He wasn't wrong. He was early. And in finance, at the wrong moment, those are the same thing. Bubbles never learn. People don't buy the thing, they buy the dream that someone else will pay more tomorrow. And dreams eventually wake up. And the bubble era has one more chapter that history class skips. The time Germany did it with actual coins, no stocks required. The 1620s, the Kipper and Whipper years, literally the tipper and seesaw time, named after the rocking scales of coin testers.
German princes needed war money, so hundreds of little mints started doing the Roman trick at industrial speed. Melt good coins, restrike them with less silver, spend them in the next territory over before anyone noticed.
Then, that territory did it back. It became a continental race to the bottom. States debasing coins to pay for wars against states debasing coins. Children played with worthless coins in the street. Riots hit the mints. Preachers called coin clipping the devil's work from the pulpit. It was the tulip mania of metal, and it fried the economies of Central Europe right as the 30 Years' War arrived to finish the job. And here's your pattern recognition moment. Notice that every bubble in this chapter, tulips, South Sea, Mississippi, clipped coins, happened within about one human lifetime of each other. The generation that got burned died. The warnings became grandpa's stories. Then the next crowd found a new shiny thing and swore this time is different. Railway mania in the 1840s, Britain poured savings into railway shares, including thousands of miles of track that were never built. The 1920s, stocks on margin. The 1990s, anything with .com in the name. 2008, houses. Every generation, one bubble, like clockwork. Economists Reinhardt and Rogoff wrote a whole book of 8 centuries of this and gave it the perfect sarcastic title. This time is different. Spoiler, it never is. The props change, the play doesn't. And the bubble century received its cruelest joke for Scotland.
The 1690s. Scotland is poor, proud, and desperate to get into the colonial game. A visionary, William Paterson, who, by the way, had just helped found the Bank of England, sells the nation a dream, a Scottish colony at Darien on the Isthmus of Panama, controlling trade between 2 oceans. The country goes all in. Not the government, the people. Nobles, merchants, farmers, widows. By some estimates, between a quarter and half of all the liquid money in Scotland poured into the Company of Scotland. It was a national lottery ticket. And everything failed. The land was a malarial swamp. The supplies were wrong. They packed wigs and Bibles to trade with people who needed neither. Spain attacked. England, protecting its own trade, ordered its colonies to give the Scots nothing. Of the 2,500 settlers, most died. The colony was abandoned twice. And Scotland woke up nationally broke, which set up the twist that changed the map of the world. Within a few years, Scotland agreed to the 1707 union with England, and buried in the deal was Article 15. England would pay Scotland the equivalent, just under £400,000, much of it earmarked to compensate the Darien investors. Great Britain, the United Kingdom itself, exists partly because a bubble bankrupted a nation and a bailout sealed the merger. 2 decades later, the South Sea bubble hit London, and the pattern was undeniable. This new paper money joint stock world could raise armies of capital overnight and vaporize them by lunch. Every regulator, every central banker, every too-good-to-be-true instinct you have, it was all born in this one insane century. The modern world wasn't built by the bubbles, it was built by the scar tissue. One more bubble-era law that explains everything. After the South Sea crash, Britain passed the Bubble Act, making it nearly impossible to form new joint stock companies without royal charter. The panicked overcorrection lasted a century. Britain, birthplace of modern finance, spent 100 years making it illegal to easily start a company, right through the early Industrial Revolution. Factories got funded through partnerships and workarounds instead. Moral of the story, and it applies to every crash since. The bubble costs you a fortune, but the panic legislation can cost you a century. Regulators, like generals, are always fighting the last war. 17th century London. If you owned gold, you had a real problem. Where do you put it? The safest vaults in the city belonged to the Goldsmiths, so merchants parked their gold there and got paper receipts. I promised to pay the bearer on demand. And then Londoners noticed something. Why go get the gold at all? Just hand over the receipt. The paper started circulating. European banknotes weren't decreed by a king. They leaked into existence from private storage tickets. And then the goldsmiths noticed something way more dangerous.
on any given day, only a tiny fraction of customers actually came for their gold. So, why not lend some of the sleeping metal out and charge interest? At that moment, quietly, in the back rooms of London, the Goldsmiths were issuing more receipts than they had gold. They were creating money out of confidence itself. That is, give or take, exactly how your bank works tonight. It's called fractional reserve banking. It built the modern world, and it has exactly one weakness. It works beautifully until everyone knocks on the door at once. In 1694, the idea put on a crown. A syndicate lent the English king £1.2 million to rebuild his war fleet, and in exchange got the right to issue notes as the Bank of England. The old lady of Threadneedle Street, the mother of every central bank on Earth. Britain then chained its paper to gold at a fixed rate, and through the entire Victorian age, the pound was gold. The gold standard spread across the planet like a calm tide, and for one long golden century, it felt eternal. World money had a sun, and it was the pound sterling. Invoices from Buenos Aires to Bombay written in it. The city of London clearing the world's payments like Rome's roads once carried its legions. But financial power doesn't fall with a bang. It moves silently in paperwork. 2 world wars drained Britain beyond arithmetic. A quarter of its national wealth burned in the first one alone, borrowed heavily from a young republic across the Atlantic for the second. By 1945, the world's greatest creditor had become a debtor, and 10,000 invoices, one at a time, had quietly switched to a new currency. Nobody announced it. There was no ceremony. One day the dollar was simply sitting in the pound's chair, and everyone had been too busy to mention it. Somewhere in tonight's paperwork, in invoices being drafted right now in Singapore and Sao Paulo, the next chapter of that story is already being written. It won't be announced either. And here's the plot twist your history teacher never mentioned. When England's money system nearly collapsed in the 1690s, the silver coin so clipped and shaved that a shilling was half a shilling, the man they called in to fix it was Isaac Newton. Yes, that Newton! Gravity Newton, the bubble victim from last chapter. This is before that, and it's the best redemption in advance story ever. They made him warden, then master of the Royal Mint. Everyone assumed it was a cushy retirement gig for a famous scientist. Newton took it personally. He ran the Great Recoinage like a military operation, melting and restriking the entire nation's silver. He standardized the milled edges, those little ridges on your coins today, remember? His anti-clipping weapon. And then he went full detective. Counterfeiting was high treason, punishable by hanging, and London's counterfeiters were folk heroes who always walked free. Newton went undercover. The father of physics spent his evenings in disguise in London's roughest taverns, gathering evidence, interviewing informants, building case files. He personally sent more than 24 counterfeiters to the gallows, including the king of them all, William Challoner, a con artist so slick he literally lectured Parliament on mint security while forging in his basement. Challoner begged Newton for mercy in letters. Newton filed the letters and watched him hang. So when you feel those ridges on a coin edge tonight, understand what you're touching. The crime-fighting legacy of the most brilliant human of his century, who decoded the heavens, lost a fortune to a bubble, and hunted forgers through the gutters of London. Money makes everyone's story weirder. Now, paper money's European story has a chapter so on brand it hurts. France, take 2. The French Revolution needed cash, and the revolutionaries had a brilliant idea. Back new paper money with the land they just confiscated from the church. The assignat, paper you could theoretically redeem for sacred real estate. What could go wrong? Printing, that's what. War with half of Europe is expensive. The presses ran hot, and within a few years, the assignat had collapsed so hard that Paris shops posted prices by the hour. Farmers refused paper and hid grain. The government responded with the law of the maximum, price controls enforced by guillotine. Diocletian with better branding. It failed exactly the way it failed in Rome. Goods vanished, black markets bloomed, and eventually France burned the printing plates in public, a state ritually executing its own currency. Out of that wreckage stepped Napoleon, who understood the assignment. He founded the Bank de France and built the gold-backed Franc Germanal and made a point of paying his armies in coin. The man conquered Europe on the slogan, essentially, of no more funny money. And here's the funny part. The Germinal franc was so solid it held its gold value for over a century, until World War I finally broke it. France gave the world both lessons in one generation. Paper money can die screaming, and trust can be rebuilt shockingly fast by anyone willing to actually keep the promise. Europe spent the next 100 years believing gold was the only adult in the room. That belief, that golden security blanket, is exactly what the 20th century was about to set on fire. And one phrase origin to pocket, as safe as the Bank of England, became a global expression for absolute security. And the old lady earned it the hard way. During the Napoleonic Wars, when invasion panic triggered a run on gold, the bank simply suspended gold payments for 24 years. Britain ran entirely on paper promises from 1797 to 1821, fought Napoleon on it, and won, then calmly went back on gold like nothing happened. Turns out safe never meant the gold was there. It meant everyone believed the story enough to stop asking, which, say it with me, is the entire monetary history of the human race in one sentence. October 1929. Wall Street had spent a decade drunk on easy money, stocks bought with borrowed cash, everyone's shoeshine boy giving tips. Then, in one brutal week, the market sobered up. The crash itself mostly wiped out speculators. It was what came next that broke the century. The banks started falling. And here's the mechanism, because it's terrifyingly simple. Banks had lent out the deposits. Remember the Goldsmiths? So when scared crowds lined up to withdraw everything at once, even healthy banks collapsed. The fear itself was the weapon. Thousands of banks went down, taking the life savings of careful people who never gambled on anything. That was the discovery of the modern age. Money can simply vanish. Not stolen, not spent, erased. Because money built on credit is money built on belief, and belief had died. Franklin Roosevelt's response is one of history's great mic drops. He closed every bank in America for a week, a national timeout, and told the country, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Then came the quiet genius move, deposit insurance. The government guaranteed small savers would get paid even if their bank died. And a strange thing happened. The bank runs just stopped. Not because banks stopped failing, but because nobody needed to run anymore. If your money is safe either way, why queue in the cold? The promise itself did the work. The panic that feeds on itself can also starve on itself. In 1944, with the war still burning, the winners gathered at a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire to redesign the world's money in 3 weeks. The plan? The dollar anchors to gold at $35 an ounce, and every other currency anchors to the dollar. One golden sun, one solar system. And for a generation, it worked. The calmest, fastest growing decades capitalism has ever seen. But there was a crack in the design. America kept printing dollars. Vietnam, social programs, the works, while the gold in Fort Knox stayed finite. Foreign governments did the math and started showing up with dollars, asking for the metal. The vault couldn't cover the promise. So on a Sunday evening in August 1971, Richard Nixon went on television, interrupted the most popular show in America, and announced he was temporarily closing the gold window. Temporarily. That was 50 years ago. It never reopened, and almost nobody watching understood what they'd just seen. For the first time in 5,000 years, no major currency on Earth was backed by anything physical. Not gold, not silver, not shells, not stones, just law, habit, and trust. They call it fiat money. Let it be done. The oldest ingredient in this entire story, pure belief, was finally standing alone. And it was about to go completely invisible. But before we leave the century of shocks, we have to stop in 1923 Germany, because this is the nightmare that haunts every central banker alive. World War I reparations crushed the German government, so it did the oldest trick in this entire video. It printed and printed, and the printing ate the country. In January 1923, a loaf of bread cost 250 marks. By November, 200 billion marks. Workers were paid twice a day and given breaks to run and shop before the price of lunch doubled. The famous photos are all real. Children building pyramids with stacks of banknotes like toy blocks. Women lighting stoves with cash because the money burned longer than the firewood it could buy. A wheelbarrow of bills for groceries, and the story goes that thieves would dump the money and steal the wheelbarrow. $1 cost 4.2 marks in 1914. By late 1923, 4.2 trillion! Life savings, pensions, insurance policies, an entire middle class's lifetime of work evaporated in months. Germany eventually stabilized with a new currency backed by, of all things, mortgaged farmland, the Rentenmark, basically a promise with dirt under it. And it worked because any believable promise beats a broken one. But the scar never healed. 100 years later, Germans remain famously debt-averse. The German word for debt, Schuld, literally also means guilt. 1 year of dead money rewired a nation's soul for a century. That's what was in the room at Bretton Woods. That's why the world chained itself to the dollar and the dollar to gold. Every money system since 1944 has been designed by people staring at photographs of children playing with worthless trillions. Fear built the modern financial world, and fear, as FDR told us, is also what breaks it. And the gold story has an American chapter most people genuinely don't believe when they first hear it. In 1933, at the bottom of the Depression, the United States confiscated its citizens' gold. Executive Order 6102. Franklin Roosevelt, yes, warm fireside chat FDR, signed an order requiring Americans to hand their gold coins and bars to the government at the official price of about $20 an ounce. Keeping more than a handful of gold became a federal crime, up to 10 years in prison. People lined up at banks and turned in their savings. And then, with the gold safely collected, the government revalued it to $35 an ounce, instantly devaluing the dollars everyone had just been paid by roughly 40%. It wasn't a heist in the legal sense. It was worse. It was policy. Wang Mang did it in year 9. FDR did it in 1933. The costume changes, the move doesn't. Why do it? Because the gold standard had become a straitjacket. The economy was drowning, and the gold anchor kept the money supply chained to the bottom. Cutting loose, however brutally, let the dollar breathe. And most economists now agree the countries that ditched gold earliest recovered from the Depression fastest. Gold, the eternal symbol of safety, had become the trap itself. Fort Knox was built right after, a granite and steel temple in Kentucky to hold the confiscated hoard, guarded like a mythological object. And the private gold ban? It stayed on the books until 1974. Your grandparents lived most of their lives in an America where owning too much gold was a crime. When Nixon closed the gold window in 71, he wasn't breaking a sacred ancient covenant. He was signing the death certificate of something FDR had already put in a coma 4 decades earlier. One more 20th century detail that sounds fake, the phrase, "In God we trust," didn't appear on US paper money until 1957.
Not the Founding Fathers, the Cold War. Congress added it partly to draw a line against godless communism. The dollar in your pocket is stamped with 1950s geopolitics. And notice the word they reached for: trust. Not gold, not silver. By 1957, everyone quietly understood what money actually runs on, and they printed the confession right onto the bills. Fiat money's deepest truth hiding in plain sight, disguised as piety, 4 decades before anyone dared say it out loud in an economics textbook. So here we are. Tonight, reach into your pocket.
Actually, you probably don't need to. More than 90% of all money on Earth right now has no physical form at all. No paper, no metal. It lives as numbers, flickering between computers and cooled buildings you will never visit. Your salary is an email between databases. And the last stretch of this story happened fast. In 1949, a New York businessman named Frank McNamara finished dinner at a restaurant and realized he'd forgotten his wallet. Legend says his wife quietly paid. He never wanted to feel that again, so he invented the Diners Club card.
The credit card, born from one man's dinner embarrassment. Then the magnetic stripe, the ATM, the tap of a phone. Each step made money faster, lighter, more invisible. Trillions of dollars flowing through wires, while the coins in your drawer became souvenirs. Then 2008 happened, and belief broke again. Banks had woven mortgages into instruments so clever that nobody, including the banks, actually understood them. The weave unraveled across the whole planet. Governments printed oceans of new money to plug the hole. And in the middle of that wreckage, someone anonymous, we still don't know who, published a 9-page PDF proposing something radical. Money with no king, no bank, no trusted stamp at all. Just mathematics, and thousands of computers keeping one shared ledger that everyone can see and no one can secretly edit. Call it whatever you want, but notice the echo, because it's deafening. A public ledger, wealth recorded by community agreement, money as shared memory. That's the stone discs, reborn as software. 10,000 years, and we've engineered our way back to the very first idea. So let's land this thing. Shells on a beach, clay drying in the sun, a lion stamped on a lump of metal, Rome's silver slowly turning to lies, paper promises from mulberry trees, a broken bench in Italy. A mountain of silver that made a kingdom poor, a flower priced like a house, a closed gold window, numbers in the dark humming, 10,000 years of costumes, and underneath every single one, the same naked thing, a promise. Money has never been gold or paper or code. Money is trust, wearing whatever outfit the century demands. And that's why it keeps working through every crash, every empire, every reinvention. Because we need it to. Because tomorrow morning, 8 billion strangers will wake up and quietly agree one more time to believe. If tonight's journey blew your mind even once, subscribe. Next time, the flower that cost more than a mansion gets its own full story, and it's even crazier up close. Sleep well. The promise will keep until morning. And the invisible money revolution has a hero nobody expects, Kenya. 2007, while Wall Street was busy blowing itself up, a Kenyan telecom launched M-Pesa, letting anyone send money by text message on a $10 brick phone. No bank account, no branch, no card. Your phone credit basically became cash. Within a few years, half of Kenya's entire GDP was flowing through it. Farmers got paid instantly. Mothers in cities sent money home to villages in seconds instead of sending envelopes on buses. Whole populations skipped the bank branch era entirely, jumped straight from cash to phone, leapfrogging a century of Western banking history in 5 years. Economists documented something remarkable: measurable drops in poverty directly traceable to a text message wallet. While Silicon Valley was inventing apps to rate sandwiches, Nairobi quietly ran the biggest money experiment of the century and won. And now every payment app you use is chasing what Kenya already proved. Money wants to be a message. That's the real ending of our 10,000-year story. And it's also the beginning. The cowrie shell was a message. The clay tablet was a message. The tally stick, the bill of exchange, the banknote, the wire transfer, the blockchain, the text to your mom. All of it the same message. We're fined for 10 millennia. I owe you. The costume keeps changing. Stone, silver, paper, plastic, light. The message never has. And tomorrow morning, in 8 billion pockets, it'll wake up and say it again. Before we close, one more piece of the invisible money world. The part where money starts behaving in ways no previous century would even recognize. Start with scale.
The Visa network alone can process tens of thousands of transactions per second. The big interbank settlement systems move more value every few days than the entire annual GDP of the planet. The pipes are so big that the water in them stopped making sense to human intuition long ago.
Then it got genuinely surreal. Negative interest rates. In the 2010s, in Denmark and Switzerland and Japan, banks began charging savers to hold deposits. And in Denmark, some homeowners briefly had negative rate mortgages. The bank effectively paid them to borrow. 5,000 years of money logic. Lend, receive interest, flipped on its head, and the sky didn't fall. Meanwhile, cash itself became a minority sport. In Sweden, most bank branches stopped handling physical money at all. In China, street beggars display QR codes. And yet, beautiful stubborn detail, Germany and Japan, two of the most advanced economies alive, still love cash. The Germans even have a saying, Nurabaris is Varus, only cash is real. Guess which country's grandparents watched money die in 1923? Trauma keeps ledgers too. And now governments are building CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, official money as pure code, while private cryptocurrencies boom and crash in tulip-shaped waves. And economists argue about programmable money, expiring money, which you'll remember the Feathercoil Islands already tried. There is genuinely nothing new under the sun, just faster suns. Every experiment in this entire video is being rerun right now, simultaneously, at planetary scale, in silicon. Place your bets. And the modern era's perfect closing anecdote, May 22nd, 2010. A programmer in Florida named Laszlo Hanyecz makes history's most expensive food order. 2 pizzas paid with 10,000 bitcoins. At the time, about $40. At Bitcoin's later peaks, over $500 million. The crypto world still celebrates Pizza Day every year, half in tribute, half in horror. And honestly, it's the most human moment in this whole 10,000-year story. Because whether it's shells, stones, silver, paper, or code, money only ever becomes real the first time somebody accepts it for dinner. One guy got hungry, and a database became a currency. The islanders of Yap would have understood immediately.